Trapmore gang, you remember when Young Thug was getting aired out for all of his jail phone calls being leaked? Well, it's not looking too good for Lil Durk and the OTF crew, because we might be getting a few Lil Durk leaked phone calls from them jailhouse recordings very, very soon.
Leaked audio of Lil Durk's lawyer admitting that Lil Durk is cooked. And gang, when you actually sit down and listen to what's coming out of that courtroom, you start to understand why people in the know are saying this man is most likely not beating this case. Let me break it down for you right now, no cap, because what the feds just dropped on Durk in the last few days changes everything. Y'all need to hear this. As of June 2026, federal prosecutors didn't just keep the same case they had. They came back and added a brand new racketeering charge on top of the murder for hire charges. That's the move. That's the tell. When the government goes back, reopens the indictment, and stacks a RICO-style charge on you weeks before trial, that ain't them feeling weak. That's them feeling strong. That's a prosecution team that looked at everything they had, looked at Durk's defense and said, we want more rope. And here's the real tea. Durk's own legal team came out and called that new indictment lipstick on a pig. Think about what that phrase actually means coming from the defense. They not saying this is false. They saying this is the same ugly thing dressed up prettier. That's a defense playing damage control, fam. That's a defense managing expectations. And when your own lawyers are out here doing expectation management instead of confidently saying, we're walking out the front door, that's when the streets start whispering that the homie is cooked. So let me keep it 100 with you for this whole video. I'm not here to disrespect Durk. Real recognize real. And whatever you think about the man, he's a Grammy-winning artist who came from nothing and built an empire. But this ain't no game, and I'm not gonna sit here and feed you a fake narrative that everything's fine when the facts are stacking against him like dominoes. Durk Banks, born Durk Devontae Banks, 32 years old, has been sitting in custody since he got arrested back in October 2024. He's pleaded not guilty. Everything I'm about to tell you is allegations the government has to prove, and he hasn't been convicted of anything. Keep that in your head the whole time. But the picture the feds are painting, it's detailed, it's documented, and piece by piece, it's getting harder for his side to knock down. By the end of this, you're gonna understand exactly why people think he's not beating this, and why his own lawyer's words might be the loudest signal of all. Let's get into it. To understand how we got here, we gotta go back, way back, because this case ain't really about 2024 or 2026. This case is rooted in something that happened on a cold November night in 2020, and if you don't understand that night, none of the rest makes sense. November 2020, Atlanta, King Von, real name Davin Bennett, Durk's close friend, his OTF brother, one of the most electric storytellers drill music ever produced, gets into a physical altercation outside a hookah lounge. That altercation turns into a shootout. When the smoke cleared, King Von was dead, and the man at the center of that confrontation? Quando Rondo's camp. Quando Rondo, real name Tyquan Bowman, a rapper out of Savannah who'd been beefing with the OTF side for a minute. One of Quando's associates, Lul Tim, was charged in Von's death, but later had it ruled self-defense. Now here's where you gotta understand street politics, gang. When King Von died, it didn't just end a beef, it lit a fuse. Von wasn't just an artist to that camp, he was family. And in the world Durk came up in, the world the prosecutors are gonna describe to a jury, a death like that doesn't just sit there, it demands an answer. The street's been talking about this for years. Everybody knew the temperature was high. Everybody knew somebody was supposed to see about it. That's the foundation. That's the motive the government is building their entire house on. Set the scene. Durk's collective, Only the Family, OTF, is more than a rap label to the prosecution. To them, it's an enterprise. And that word enterprise is gonna matter a whole lot when we get to that new racketeering charge. The feds say Durk founded OTF around 2010, and that over the years, a subset of members and associates started doing dirt, murder, attempted murder, allegedly at his direction. Durk's people say that's nonsense, that OTF is a record label, a brand, a vehicle that pulled kids out of poverty. And honestly, both things can be argued, but the government only needs 12 people in a box to believe their version. So you got the motive, revenge for Von. You got the structure, OTF as an alleged enterprise. And now all you need is the incident. And that brings us to the day everything the feds built comes crashing into one moment. But that's just the beginning though, because the feds didn't stop at one shooting. This is where it gets crazy, and this is the part people sleep on. When you read what prosecutors have been filing over the last year and a half, they're not painting Durk as a guy who slipped up one time. They're painting a pattern. And in federal court, pattern is everything. Let me layer this in for you piece by piece, like evidence on a table. First piece, the 2019 Atlanta incident. Durk was actually arrested back then on felony charges, attempted murder, aggravated assault. Those charges got dropped in 2022. Case closed, right? Wrong. Because in the new indictment, the feds are referencing that 2019 Atlanta situation again as part of the alleged pattern of the enterprise. That's the thing about the federal government, fam. Stuff you thought was dead and buried, they dig it back up and use it as context. A dropped charge isn't a clean slate to them. It's a data point. Second piece, and this one's heavy. Prosecutors are now alleging that in 2022, Durk paid $1 million for the murder of a rival gang member in Chicago. $1 million. That's not a lyric, that's not a metaphor. That's a specific dollar figure tied to a specific allegation in a federal filing. Now, and I gotta keep it 100. That's an allegation, they gotta prove it. But understand the strategy. Every time they add a number, a date, a location, they're making the story feel more real to a future jury. They're turning Durk from a rapper into, in their words, the head of an operation. But wait, it gets worse, because all of that, the 2019 case, the alleged Chicago hit, that's the supporting cast. That's the stuff they sprinkle in to make the main event look like just one more entry in a long list. And the main event, that's where we're going next. That's the night that put Durk in a cell. And what happened that night, that's the turning point of this whole story. August 2022, Los Angeles, a gas station. This is the moment everything in this case revolves around. Here's the play-by-play the way prosecutors lay it out. Quando Rondo, the man on the other side of the King Von situation, is out in LA. He pulls up to a gas station with people in his circle, and according to the government, a hit team was waiting. Not random, not a coincidence, a planned, financed cross-country operation. The feds allege that Durk directed and financed multiple OTF members, they've described it as 5-6 associates, to travel across the country to hunt down and kill Quando Rondo. In the prosecution's own words from earlier filings, the indictment charges that the defendant directed and financed hitmen to travel across the country to hunt and kill his rival. Read that back. Hunt and kill. That's the language federal prosecutors are using. That's not a vibe, that's a theory of premeditation. But here's the tragedy, and here's where the whole thing turns into something even darker. Quando Rondo survived. The bullets that were allegedly meant for him hit somebody else, his cousin, a young man named Xavier Robinson, known as Lil Pab. Lil Pab died at that gas station, 20-something years old, gone. And that's the murder at the center of this case. Not the man they allegedly wanted, his cousin. Collateral in a war he didn't start. And gang, this is the part I need y'all to really sit with because it's bigger than any rap beef. A young man is dead. A family buried somebody. Whatever happens to Durk in that courtroom, that loss is permanent. That's the human cost underneath all the headlines and all the leaked audio drama. I'm gonna break down the legal chess like a detective for the rest of this video, but I'm not gonna let us forget that a real person lost their life. Real recognize real, and respecting the dead is part of keeping it 100. Now, back to the case. Because the prosecution doesn't just have a theory about that gas station. They claim they have the receipts. And that's where this thing went from rap on trial to the homie might be cooked. Now here's where people started connecting the dots. And this is the part where you understand why even strong defense lawyers are stuck. Let me lay out the evidence the way the feds have been telegraphing it methodically, like a detective walking you through a murder board. The streets knew this was a rap on trial fight from day one. Durk's lawyers came out swinging with a powerful argument, and I'm not going to pretend it's a bad one. They said, and this is a quote that hit hard, "When you see an artist's rap lyrics quoted as evidence against them, it's a glaring indication there's no real evidence against that person." That's a strong line. That's a defense saying, if all you got is bars, you ain't got nothing. And for a minute, that argument had legs. They even caught the feds slipping. Prosecutors had cited lyrics from a Babyface Ray song called Wonderful Wayne and Jackie Boy as proof Durk was rapping about his revenge. But Durk's team came back with sworn affidavits from producers showing that verse was recorded in January 2022, months before the shooting. You can't be rapping about revenge for something that hasn't happened yet. That was a real win for the defense. That made the feds look sloppy. But here's where it gets crazy. The feds adjusted. They came back and made it clear. Durk isn't on trial for his lyrics. He's on trial for the murder plot, and the lyrics are just part of it. In their words, the defendant was charged for his murderous conduct, not his lyrics. They stripped out the weak music references and said, "We still got more than enough without them." And that pivot, that's a dangerous sign for the defense because it means the government's confidence doesn't rest on the bars alone. So what does it rest on? Let me break it down. Phone calls, text messages, social media posts, surveillance video, and the big one, cooperating witnesses. Back in January 2026, prosecutors detailed a plan to call cooperating witnesses to testify. Cooperating witnesses, fam, you know what that means in the streets and you know what it means in court. That means somebody who was allegedly there, somebody who was allegedly part of it, is sitting on the other side of the table now telling the government a story. That's the thing that breaks cases, not lyrics, people. And the scale of this thing is wild. We're talking about more than 30,000 pages of records and reports, photographs, and hundreds of gigabytes of digital material. Surveillance video, audio recordings, all of it. That's not a thin case you poke holes in, that's a mountain. The case is so big and so complex, the trial itself kept getting pushed back because both sides needed time just to get through the discovery. But the internet went crazy when the lyric rulings came down, and that's the chapter that tells you which way the wind is blowing. Here's the real tea on the courtroom fights, because this is where you separate fact from hype. February 2026. Big stretch of hearings in front of U.S. District Judge Michael W. Fitzgerald in Los Angeles. The defense, led by heavy hitters including Drew Findling, the same Findling known as the billion-dollar lawyer, the man who's repped some of the biggest names in the game. They went hard to get all the lyrics and music videos thrown out. Defense attorney Marissa Goldberg stood up in that courtroom and said it plain. This is art, this is music. Their whole argument was that rap is hyperbolic poetry, that it's metaphor, that a jury would take bars, literally, and convict a man for storytelling. And listen, they won some. Keep it 100, they got real victories. The judge tossed a line from Hanging with Wolves, where Durk raps about hopping on a flight with a warrant. Prosecutors wanted to use it to say he planned to flee, and the judge called that sheer propensity and threw it out. The judge also denied several other lyric excerpts, ruling that even though some described actions similar to what Durk's accused of, there was no real evidence the lyrics referred specifically to that 2022 LA shooting. He even said there was virtually no evidence of when these lyrics were written or even recorded. Those are defense wins. Don't let nobody tell you Durk's team isn't fighting. But here's where it gets crazy, and here's the part that should worry his supporters. Out of 13 song excerpts prosecutors wanted, the judge allowed 4. He allowed screenshots from the music videos, and the heaviest one, he did not rule out a specific video the prosecution claims was basically a bounty, a reward offer for harm against Quando Rondo. The judge left the door open on that, saying it depends on whether prosecutors can prove the recording serves as proof of the bounty. Now think about that. A judge entertaining the idea that a music video could be evidence of a murder bounty. That's not rap on trial anymore. In the court's framing, that's potential evidence of a crime, and it got worse for the defense. The judge agreed to allow fan comments off Durk's X account to support the prosecution's theory that Durk faced public pressure to avenge King Von. And this is the killer. The judge ruled that Durk's own 2023 comments on DJ Academic's podcast about that pressure to retaliate can come in. His own words, on a public podcast, about the exact pressure the government says drove the whole plot. That ain't a lyric. That ain't art. That's the man talking in his own voice, and now a jury gets to hear it. So when you tally up the rulings, yeah, the defense scored, but the prosecution walked away with motive evidence, an alleged bounty video still in play, fan pressure context, and Durk's own podcast statements. That's not a split. That's the feds winning the rounds that matter. And that's a huge part of why people started saying the homie is cooked. But here's what really matters about that leaked audio energy and what the defense has actually been saying out loud. When you hear leaked audio of his lawyer admitting he's cooked, understand what that's really pointing at. It's pointing at the tone. It's pointing at the shift. Early on, Durk's camp was defiant. They said the allegations were false and lacking in the most basic due diligence. They called him a Grammy-winning artist, a dedicated father, a loving husband, a man committed to his Neighborhood Heroes Foundation. That's a confident defense. That's a defense saying, we're innocent and we're going to prove it. But fast forward to June 2026, weeks before trial, when the feds dropped that new racketeering charge. What does the defense say now? They call it lipstick on a pig. They accuse prosecutors of repackaging old claims and adding unrelated accusations to prop up what they describe as a weak case. They maintain he's innocent. But you hear the difference in the temperature? You went from false and baseless to they're dressing up old stuff. That's a defense that's now reacting to the government's moves instead of dictating the fight. That's a defense on the back foot. And that's what people mean when they talk about a lawyer admitting he's cooked. It's rarely a literal confession. No real lawyer is going to say, yeah, my client's guilty. What it actually looks like is the language softening, the confidence draining, the strategy shifting from we win outright to we fight to limit the damage. When the defense's main public posture becomes complaining that the indictment is unfair and bloated rather than confidently dismantling the actual evidence, that's the streets reading between the lines. And the streets been right about this kind of thing before. Here's where it gets crazy though. The racketeering charge itself is the real story, because RICO changes the whole game. With a straight murder for hire charge, the government's got to really nail down that specific plot. But with a racketeering charge, they get to put the whole alleged enterprise on trial. The 2019 Atlanta thing, the alleged $1 million Chicago hit, the OTF structure. All of it becomes fair game as pattern of activity. It widens the lens. It lets prosecutors tell a jury one big story about an alleged criminal organization instead of one narrow story about one shooting. That's harder to defend. That's more places to get cut. And the feds adding it weeks before trial tells you they want that wider battlefield. Now you see why people connect new charge plus softer defense language and land on he's cooked. It's not one thing, it's the pattern. So where do things actually stand right now in real time? Let me give you the current status, no spin. Durk's been in custody since October 2024. That's a long time, fam. There was even a stretch where he was in solitary for around 5 months, and his lawyers raised concerns about it being cruel and unusual punishment before he got out of solitary. The trial itself has been a moving target. It got pushed and pushed because of how massive the case is, bounced around the calendar, and as of the latest, it's set to kick off in August 2026. Durk's team has also kept fighting for pre-trial release, kept getting denied by magistrate judges, kept trying to take it up the chain. And in the middle of all this, you got the human side bleeding through. Earlier this year, Durk dropped an audio message to his followers talking about his mental state, about working on his patience, saying it's been on his heart to save the generation and that he's tired of being a pawn for the culture. Now you read that however you want. Some people hear genuine reflection from a man staring down the rest of his life behind bars. Some people hear a man positioning his image before a trial. Either way, it tells you the weight he's carrying. This is real life for him now. The ripple effects are everywhere. OTF as a brand is under a microscope. Every artist affiliated is getting looked at sideways. Other people in the case, the co-defendants, got their own exposure. And there was even a moment where a leaked courtroom photo of the co-defendants caused chaos around the fight over whether the jury should be anonymous. The prosecution's been pushing hard to protect the identity of witnesses and jurors, which tells you the level of seriousness and the fear of retaliation baked into this whole thing. And the defense fought that too, arguing an anonymous jury would make Durk look like a criminal enterprise before a single word of testimony. But that leaked photo made their argument harder. That's the aftermath. A man in custody almost 2 years. A trial finally bearing down in August. A new charge widening the battlefield. A defense fighting on multiple fronts. And a young man, Lil Pab, still gone. Because at the end of the day, that's what all of this is really about. So let me zoom out for y'all because this is bigger than Durk. This is about the culture. Here's the real lesson sitting in the middle of this whole case. Drill music, street music, it was built on authenticity, on I really lived this. That realness is exactly what made it powerful. What made artists like Durk and Von connect with millions of kids who saw their own lives in those bars. But that same realness is now the thing the government is trying to use to put men in prison for life. The exact authenticity that built the empire is the rope they're trying to hang it with. And that's the trap, fam. The more real you claim it is, the more a prosecutor can stand up and say, see, he told you himself. That's why this case matters way beyond Durk. Whatever Judge Fitzgerald decides about those lyrics and videos could set a precedent for how courts all over the country treat rap as evidence going forward. Every young artist coming up is gonna be affected by what happens in that LA courtroom. Are your bars art, protected expression, storytelling, or are they a confession the state can read back to you under oath? That question is on trial right alongside Durk Banks. And here's the part I really want y'all to think about. We can break this down all day. The charges, the rulings, the leaked audio energy, the lawyer's lipstick on a pig line, the cooperating witnesses, the racketeering pivot. And when you stack it all up, honestly, it's hard to look at it and say, Durk is in a strong position. The feds win the cases they bring at extremely high rates. They stack charges. They got cooperators. They got Durk's own words. They widen the battlefield. The defense is fighting hard and scoring points, but they're fighting on the government's terms now. That's why people say he's most likely not beating this. I'm not gonna lie to you and say otherwise, but I'm also not God, and a jury is a jury. And stranger things have happened. He's pleaded not guilty, and the government still has to prove every bit of it beyond a reasonable doubt. Innocent until proven guilty isn't just a saying, and it's the actual rule, and Durk gets the full weight of it. But I'd be doing y'all dirty if I pretended the picture wasn't grim. So here's my question for you, and I want real answers in the comments, not the fake stuff. Do you think Durk beats this in August? You think the rap on trial defense lands with a jury? Or you think the feds' pile of phone records, witnesses, and his own podcast words is too much to climb out of? You think the leaked audio talk is real insight or just internet noise? Drop your honest take below. I read them, and the real ones in these comments always see things I don't. And keep this in your heart through all of it. A young man named Lil Pab lost his life, and a family is still grieving. Behind every headline and every hot take, that's the truth that doesn't change. That's the breakdown, gang. That's where it really stands. No filter. Maximum respect for the real ones. Stay tuned, because this story is far from over, and when that trial starts in August, I'm gonna be right here breaking down every single move for y'all. Type shit. One love.